Hey, Wiz, should anybody be handcrafting software anymore, or should we just be vibing everything?
You know what? We should definitely not just be vibing everything, for sure. Yes.
Okay. But like truly curated handcrafting from scratch as a human, is this a paradigm that's basically dead?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it is true that there is less and less drive to have that be the case because the models are getting better and better, and the tooling is getting better and better, and we can reasonably, in some way, in some part of that pipeline, AI will benefit you, right? Even if it's just a little bit. And so it's sneaking in just a little bit, even in most human-centric, scenarios.
Okay, so you are a practitioner, you're coding every day. Do you use what we'll talk about today is this broad category of coding agents? Do you use coding agents for basically everything you're coding today?
Not basically everything, but I would say that some majority of the projects that I'm going to be working on, I will use like at least autocomplete, right? For boilerplate.
Autocomplete. Yeah. Okay. So are you using something like Codex, like we'll look at today, Codex CLI or Claude Code in your normal daily workflows?
Not for work. No, for me, too far away from the code. But I do use other tools that supplement my ability to develop code that aren't those two specific tools.
Okay. So you're using things like Copilot, like Cursor, on more of a daily basis, where you get to sit inside the IDE. That's where you've been coding for a long time. That's maybe a place where this kind of rubber starts to meet the road with these AI coding tools.
That's right. That's my happy place, is in the IDE, right? So that's why I prefer the tools that are in the IDE, because it means I'm not having to leave my happy, warm IDE cave to brave into the CLI specific tool like Codex, right?
That's
where
right.
it's meant to be an interactive, in some part, interactive experience. It's meant to be a primarily CLI driven task. I'm a big lover of CLI, but I still type my commands, when I'm using the command line.
You're so old-fashioned, Wiz.
I know.
Oh my God. Well, so there are very practical levels that I think we want to outline today about what different types of coding agents there are, how people can use them today, how you use them specifically in your workflows, and how we might think about using them heading forward into the future that gets ever more autonomous. Like, for each of us, maybe there's a different answer, but there's sort of practical buckets we can put coding agents in and then decide which one works for us. Something like that.
Exactly. There's a right. Listen, we're far enough into the year, right? There's a right fit for you, and there's options for every layer of abstraction that you want to set up.
Including if you want to just wait till next year and basically just vibe your life away. Okay, very cool, Wiz. Let's go ahead and kick off. We'll have a lot of great discussion today around coding agents, and we've got basically a coding agent taxonomy that we've put together ourselves, and we're excited to share it with everybody today. So we'll see you back shortly, Wiz, as we kick off the sesh. Hey, everybody, my name is Dr. Greg, and that is the Wiz. We're co-founders of AI Makerspace. We're on a mission to build the world's leading community for people who want to build, ship, and share. And the tool that we're talking today about is the Codex CLI, and more broadly about coding agents, because these are things that will really accelerate your ability to build, ship, and share production LLM applications. If you have questions along the way, we've got kind of a discussion-heavy session today, because these words and these categories of things like agents and coding agents and code agents are kind of elusive, and we're really trying to break them down and make them make sense to you today. So if you have questions, comments, etc., please throw them into the Slido link that's on your viewing platform in the description box. Or if you're live with us, go ahead and smash the YouTube live chat while we're in the midst of getting down to the root and first principle concepts that sit beneath coding agents. All right, let's get into it today. We're going to talk Codex CLI, but we're going to paint this picture of Codex with the idea of coding agents in 2025. As we'll see, interestingly, Codex is not a sort of first-time release tool or attempt at this from OpenAI. It's something that actually started 4 years ago under the same name. So this is an evolving space, and we'll get you up to date today with what's happening. Today, we really want to dig in to exactly what a coding agent is. We've got kind of this taxonomy we've put together that we think kind of reflects the state of the art today, and we're excited to share it with you. We also want to go through some best practices that were released when thinking about CLI coding agents. This was released by Anthropic, but we're going to sort of generalize it to all CLI-based coding agents and hopefully give you guys some takeaways and tips for deciding on where these things fit into your workflow. Of course, Wiz will do a demo, show you exactly how to use the Codex CLI. We'll build a quick application. We'll show you both the suggest and kind of full autonomy mode that you can get on this sort of emerging experimental open source tool. So we'll talk Codex, and then we'll talk the levels of coding agents before we talk about best practices and coding agents versus code agents before the Codex demo. So if you don't like code, this is not the event for you. But if you do, buckle up. Let's go. Codex. This was released April 16th, last week. And it was released open source from OpenAI, which is so refreshing that they're finally doing this kind of thing. We saw this with Swarm and now the OpenAI Agents SDK. And this is sort of an early kind of experimental release similar to what we saw there. This is a lightweight coding agent that runs in your terminal. And reviewing some of their materials they're putting out, Codex CLI is really built for folks that live in the terminal already. So if you want that ChatGPT-level help, reasoning, actual ability to generate code, etc., and also the kind of ability to kind of put your context in, you can get all this from the CLI now. And they're calling this sort of chat-driven development, and it's very, very quick to set up, very open source, very lightweight. Cool, very cool. We thought it was cool enough that it deserved us to talk about it. Again, this is an experimental thing. They're like, hey, if it breaks, let us know. Please contribute. And what's interesting here is that OpenAI is actually putting some cash down, not a lot of cash, but putting a little bit of cash down to some of these open source alternatives. So this is pretty cool to see them start to do some things like this. They got this $1 million initiative where they're going to give grants away in sort of $25,000 API credit increments. So if it's of interest to you to start contributing to open source coding agents, CLI based ones, this might be something for you to check out if you really vibe with the sesh today. They also offer a couple of recipes, and this gives us some insight into how we might use a Codex type of tool. You know, hey, write unit tests for utils/date.ts, or something like explain what this regex does, or as we'll see, kind of the classic is like look through my GitHub and tell me what this thing is about, or carefully review this repo and propose 3 high impact, well-scoped PRs. So that's pretty cool as well. We can kind of imagine that we get more and more levels of autonomy from there, but even that through the terminal is very, very powerful. And we can kind of get this out of the box for free today. Now, interestingly, if we look back at kind of the story of Codex here, Codex was actually the original model that powered GitHub Copilot. Remember, GitHub is something that's owned by Microsoft, and this was from 2021 when they were kind of first getting started down this road. Now, by 2023, March, they had deprecated the OpenAI Codex models, and today the recommendation is to go ahead and just use GPT 4.0 because it can do everything Codex can do, but also a whole lot of other stuff. And so if you go and you find the original Codex blog, it's not that relevant. It kind of pushes you back to this new open source CLI. So we can kind of draw a couple of conclusions from this, although it's not super clear exactly what all this means. But we know that the old Codex and the new Codex are definitely related to coding. They've got the same name. Is it the sort of next step of their vision of Codex? We'll leave it to you guys to decide by the end of the session today. To put this into more context, we want to talk about coding agents and sort of the different levels of coding agents that exist today. And you've probably heard of many of these, from Cursor to Manus and beyond. And we want to kind of start with our definition and the way we like to think about agents. An agent to us is just a system that can leverage or emulate reasoning to make dynamic decisions in an application flow. And so we can kind of extend this. It's directly extensible to something like a coding agent by saying that a coding agent is going to be a system that can leverage reasoning to make dynamic decisions in an application flow to produce something like working and functional code. Now, how well it works, how functional it is, how prone to security risks, how extensible, how scalable, all of that maybe we should leave out of coding agents today, especially in the era of vibe coding. But what we can do is we can kind of use this idea to sort of map out kind of where we've been and where we're headed in this agentic AI world we live in now. You know, we're going to offer kind of 9 levels. And we can kind of think back to the way people classically wrote code in the first place. Manually, they wrote code just as a human, character by character, or even before that, sort of bit by bit. In the large swath of time over the last 20 years, sort of between truly manual and kind of the Copilot plus era, we kind of just were Googling things. We're using Stack Overflow. We're doing a lot of copy pasting. We're looking to find patterns. We were looking to figure out how to deal with errors. And, you know, this was really kind of a huge boon for tech, for society over the past 20 years. What happened when we started to get into Copilots is now all of a sudden we can kind of predict the next couple of tokens. We have some models that can figure out what exactly we're typing towards and what exactly we're going to type next. Code was always well suited for this because it's so structured. So this idea of like tab to complete, this is something that probably most programmers are using today. If you're not using it, there's got to be some really good reason why you're not allowed to, because it really is sort of just a pure efficiency enhancer here. This gets us to sort of level 3. You know, ChatGPT comes out 2022 in November, and we kind of get this ability to say, hey, write this for me. I don't even want to write, just write it, and I'll copy paste the whole function you write whole cloth from scratch. And this could be ChatGPT, it could be Claude, it could be Gemini, it could be any of these big model providers. And that's sort of where we've been for a little while. And that's I think where most people are comfortable thinking about. This gets us into this coding agent space. And the coding agents, they're not well differentiated today, but we can differentiate them in some sense across a few different dimensions. So for instance, the coding agents that we can access in the command line directly, these are things like Codex CLI and Claude Code. This is sort of the agent without the GUI, okay? Whereas if we go and we want to then bake our CLI into our IDE, like many of us are so used to doing, setting up our dev environment, this is where we get into things like Cursor, things like Windsurf, kind of the newest AI code editor, And of course, VS Code is quickly catching up and kind of reaching feature parity with Cursor and the like. So it goes in the industry. And then there's this sort of next layer of kind of the autonomous AI engineer. There's great promise here. We sort of saw a lot of promises from things like Devon. I'm hearing a lot of folks in our community talk about Manus today, sort of a Chinese company's attempt at this kind of Devon-like autonomy. And this coding agent is leveraging not the CLI, not the IDE, but can actually leverage a browser, a web interface directly. And what it's using is it's kind of using screenshots. We kind of effectively get this multimodal ability baked in. And we can kind of leverage screenshots. We can kind of use the mouse. We can kind of use the keyboard. And we kind of give all this control over to a coding agent. Now, this is not where it ends, because this will continue. And sort of the future of coding agents is something like multi-agent teams, where you've got front-end and back-end devs, and you've got testing and QA, and you've got the product manager, and you've got the supervisor, and everybody's working together to sort of code up the app. Now, you're going to have to pay these things in API credits, very much like you have to pay people today. So none of this is free, but it is going to be one heck of a vibe to put apps like this together. This isn't here yet, although there's some early signals of companies that are kind of working on this, even not necessarily companies, but open source projects. Only a few that we were able to locate, and none that we really feel like are kind of worth diving into or sharing yet. And of course, kind of the future is the entire AI-driven organization. You imagine the sort of one-person trillion-dollar company that might exist in the 21st century. You imagine this idea of all of the employees are AI. And so we can kind of ask ourselves, when we think about these levels, is like, how far away are we from the actual work, from the scoping, the planning, the reasoning, the building, the iteration? And, I want to bring Wiz up for, our first discussion here is like, when we think about how far we are away, maybe we should be thinking about how far we should be away from this. Today, how far should we be away from, like, the actual work,
Yeah, it's a perfect question. There's no easy, so should is such a interesting and wonderful word, right?
It is.
We should be as far away as we are comfortable being, right? So the idea of that, or what is meant to be said by that is, if you are someone who is used to typical software development, et cetera, it's going to be much easier for you to sit in tools that are closer to the code, right? That's closer to your natural habitat, right?
Yeah.
If you are one of these people who subscribes to this idea of the best time to learn to code is next year, right? Then it's going to be it's going to look a little different for you.
Yeah.
And in that case, like tools like Manus or tools like Claude Code, Codex are probably great. But again, this really comes down to what is your comfort heading into these tools, right? Is going to help determine your final position.
I see. Okay, so let's have some fun with the chat here before we dig into questions I want to ask you about our levels here. So because we have level 4 and level 6 here, Rustum S asks, and we get our first MCP question of the day. Here we go. Is level 4 plus MCP level 6? Is that a good way of thinking about this, or not at all?
No. So, I mean, so it's not like, oh, what a terrible way to think about it. Okay.
Yeah.
But it is true that, like, when we're talking about levels of abstraction, we're talking about moving from like level 0 to like level 6. It's how far away from the code are we, right? So level 4 is still pretty close. You know what I mean? Like even if we add cool tools, even if we add cool stuff, cool functionality, we're still like right next to the code, right? We're not interacting through like some web browser and then that's it, right? And then all kinds of things happen in the background and suddenly an app. And I think that's the way to think about it.
Okay. So, all right. So I have a couple questions on this, and we want to hear your super metal opinions here, Wiz. So if we talk about working and functional code, okay, is there a meaningful differentiation in the coding agents that we have shown here that you're likely to get working and more functional code from level 4 versus level 6, for instance? Or is the likelihood of you sort of getting working and functional code and you kind of being able to move forward in a very productive way kind of equivalent between all of these coding agent levels?
Yeah, so there should be no terrible statement to make. There should be no difference.
Okay.
So their capability, right? Their capability should be able to be equivalent, right? As in, you could set up the same agent stack in something like or a tool similar to Cursor that you could have in Manus. It's like the way you're interacting with it is different, right? But the actual work that it should be doing should be the same. Now, this is not currently true. Manus and Cursor are differentiated on feature right now, on capability right now, right? But there is no reason that needs to be true. It's just currently true. And I imagine, especially if the last like even 3 months or anything to go by, we're gonna get more and more insane levels of capabilities from these tools.
Okay, so if I'm Manus and Devin, I'm worried about Cursor because they are coming up in the game quick, and maybe they'll outpace level 6 in no time, adding some multimodality. Okay, so like, is there real like feature parity across each of these levels today? So for instance, VS Code versus Cursor. I think a lot of people kind of similar to the way we kind of think about the early days of LangChain. Oh, LangChain's trash. It's so bad. Well, if you wait a couple months, it's less trash. So, everybody knows Cursor is a fork of VS Code, but VS Code, I believe, has been doing some work to kind of catch up. Are we getting to a space where these are kind of, same, or not? Is it still really clear that like there's a clear leader across each of these categories?
I believe there's a clear leader. I mean, it's getting less and less clear, right?
Yeah.
So the waters are getting murkier. Maybe we can't see the bottom anymore, right? But we can still see pretty far down. I think at the end of the day, like Claude Code just has more features than Codex.
It does,
right?
It does, yeah.
Cursor just has more stuff you can do than VS Code's Copilot. That's just true right now. It doesn't mean that it's going to be true in even 4 weeks, right? Like we have no idea, but like that's today, right. April 23rd, 2025, true. Right? And I think this is the idea, right? We don't have a good, the space is evolving so rapidly, and these tools, it's a meme, but it's true, right? Like there are a lot of people who on the day that Codex was released, used Codex to add features to Codex, right? Like this is the right. This is the state of the world that we're in.
Let's go. Yeah. Well, and we're hearing things like OpenAI is in talks to buy Windsurf for $3 billion or whatever, and if you roll that forward a couple months after OpenAI buys Windsurf, it's like, are they competitive with Cursor? I imagine they would be, and so there's all this interesting stuff happening. I want to sort of go to some of the questions in the chat here. So I think this is a really interesting one from Live AI Lab. Is level 6 here, Manus, Devin, is this considered no code? Like if we go above this kind of coding agent in the IDE, are we actually in a space where we don't really need to be coding anymore? Or do we never really get out of that no code? We never really go from agents that code to no code, low code.
No, man, this is definitely no code, low code.
Okay.
Devin is definitely no code, low code. Like these are the primary ways these tools are being used. And so yes, it is a different category, right? That is the next level where we now transcend beyond needing to type with our hands in code and instead just turbo prompting, right?
Yeah,
in the matrix.
right.
Yes, it is a whole different category. It is the way we interact with these tools, right, is the thing that differentiates the levels. And with Manus,
Yeah.
but now it's interesting because you don't need to write any code with Cursor or Claude Code, right? Because that's what the AI is going to do.
Yeah.
So what do we even mean by no low code in 2025?
That's
right.
That's right.
What
do we mean by development, right? Product development, because it's the interactive development environment. If it's just the way we interact is changing, it's just the interface. We talk about this a lot, right? It's just the interface. It's not like what's actually happening is changing. It's just the way we engage is getting to ever higher layers of abstraction.
That's right. Higher and higher.
Ever higher.
Ever higher. It's getting crazy out here, right? It's getting crazy out here.
And it's only going to get crazier. So, okay. So, I guess two hot takes real quick if you have them. Manus or Devin?
Manus.
Cursor or Windsurf?
I mean, unless my answer might change in 3 weeks, but Cursor today.
Oh, Cursor still got it. Okay. And then we'll ask Claude versus Codex later. Okay. Cool. Got it. Finally, we didn't really talk about computer use agents, but did we yet? Do we talk about browser use agents? Isn't that what Manus and Devin are doing? But we have this computer using thing from Claude and from OpenAI. Are those different? Are they the same? Which level do they fit into?
Great question. Yes. Again, they're all agents. They're all doing stuff. At the end of the day, what I hope people focus on is more so the interface, the way we interact with these things, and less so the tools they are equipped with, right? Especially like Claude Code, you can use MCP for web browsing. Cursor, you can use MCP for web browsing. Computer use. Well, we're using the computer. We're doing CLI commands on our computer, right? We can add an MCP that gives us the ability to click, mouse, right?
That's right.
These
and even Codex CLI is also multimodal, right? You can pass in screenshots and you can do diagrams and you can do all the stuff, right?
You betcha. Absolutely. All true. All of it. Right. This is we are these tools are it. I feel like this is the same feeling that I had when I learned there were IDEs. When I went from oh man, there's beyond Notepad++. You know what I mean? There's this whole this whole suite of tools. I get one screen, all this functionality, right? It's like when you first learn about PyCharm, right? Most people still go through PyCharm, right? And you're like, wow, this is kind of insane. I've just been using Notepad or Sublime Text, and now suddenly I've got 1,000 buttons that I can press, right? This feels very similar.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we're leveling up here as AI engineers. Let's go. So as we level up, we'll talk about best practices for leveraging tools like Codex. We'll see back in a minute as we go through this. This is from a guide that was released from Anthropic actually last week as well. Now, this was specifically focused on Claude Code. So what we've done is we've kind of extracted the pieces that will apply more generally, and we can kind of get it into 5 buckets here. We want to be customizing our workflows, basically setting up our dev environment. We want to be leveraging common patterns of giving coding agents autonomy. And then we want to be optimizing our workflow by putting the right stuff in context. Oh my God, so classic. There's also this idea of headless mode, which is pretty cool, albeit maybe a little bit little bit scary, a little bit of a security threat potentially, and then adding more agents because, more agents is more better. When we think about customizing, I mean, part of it is just like, yeah, okay, let's do dark mode. But there's also a part of it that's like, okay, let's get this set up. Kind of like when you join a company for the first time, you need to set up your dev environment. You need to connect to their GitHub. You need to make sure you can do stuff in the places that you do stuff. So this is kind of also true if you're going to use something that's just a CLI coding agent. You want to set this up. And that's kind of really all there is to it. Again, there are some specific things to Claude Code that they will mention in this guide if you prefer to use that tool. Again, they're leading on features right now because this is an experimental thing that just came out. But this idea of connecting to stuff you use all the time, processes you use all the time, and tools you use all the time, that's kind of the first piece. From there, you want to start thinking about common patterns. And this is like, don't reinvent the wheel. Okay. So there's a lot of sort of common patterns that we can leverage and we can set our CLI coding agents loose on. For instance, explore, plan, code, commit. This idea of, you're going to figure out, explore the space, give it a task, come up with a plan, and then you're going to do the code, and then you're going to actually commit it to GitHub. And, there's similar patterns here that we can go through that we can think about. We'll see some of these patterns demoed today by Wiz in our CLI demo. And then there's also some really obvious things that we can do, right? So code-based QA, I can just ask questions about my code base already, right? This is like the classic argument for, long context LLMs. We can put the whole code base in and ask questions against it. So we can kind of do this out of the box with just a CLI tool now, which is really, really cool. Use agents to interact with Git, to interact with GitHub, to work easier with Jupyter Notebooks. All of this stuff is built in already to just CLI interface tools. So again, same stuff is going on behind the scenes. And, the only difference is the way we are interfacing with it. So we can kind of think about these common patterns. We don't need to start from scratch with stuff that doesn't really work. I'd encourage you guys to check out each of these in more detail if you're really digging in and starting to use Codex CLI. We can also optimize our context. We can basically put our specific prompts that we want in our prompt library, our specific images that we want to have access to. We can put our specific files that we want it to know about, that we want it to be able to effectively do RAG on. We can give it specific URLs that it can go and find stuff with. And we can just pass data directly in as well. So this is all about putting the right stuff in context. It's all about just trying to make your environment as well set up for things that you're going to do as possible. And then, there's some real simple practices, right? Like this one's hilarious. Use \clear to keep the context focused. What a classic terminal thing to do. Just clear it all the time. And this idea of like, make sure that you're following coding best practices and you're not just like vibing your way into corners and having a bad time messing things up without being able to roll them backwards. And then there's this idea of headless mode, which is pretty cool. It's kind of this idea that you kind of just give it a task and you just say, go. And it kind of goes away until it's ready to come back. It's kind of this set it and forget it thing. And it's this very non-interactive way of engaging with the CLI tool. This is similar to the browser use, computer use stuff where you give it a task and you just set it off. So you can leverage this and you can kind of just see what the CLI tool does for you, see what the coding agent decides to do. Maybe it'll find optimized pathways, maybe not, but it's certainly a fun thing to play with, especially if you're getting your hands on these tools for the first time. There's a lot of ways to set up multi-coding teams. Like, we talked about earlier, you could imagine the coding team of the future where you have the front end, the back end, the testing, the QA, et cetera. You could set all this up ostensibly in a CLI based tool today. But the easiest thing would be have one agent write code, the other one check it, basically classic pair programming, basically LLM as a judge. This kind of thing can help improve your efficiency and hopefully spot errors before they manifest in your code. Again, there are also many Claude specific things that you might want to think about. So Wiz, I want to bring you back up to talk a little bit about some of these offered best practices here. When we think about Codex or we think about Claude Code, we think about using these CLI tools. What do you think are the most important things? We've heard from Claude and Anthropic and kind of what they're offering. But all of this seems pretty straightforward, kind of best practice for coders in general. Anything stick out to you that you want to mention? And maybe you can talk a little bit more about headless mode and some of the patterns that you think are particularly useful.
Yeah, I mean, headless mode's a way that we can integrate these kinds of solutions and services into things like CI/CD pipelines. I think that's the big one, right? So all of the tools mention this as like a focus. Otherwise, these are just best practices that we as humans have discovered over the last, however many years of software development. And we're just trying to kind of, incorporate in our AI tooling so that we continue to be able to, build forward, right? Because these agents, not to anthropomorphize too much, okay, but just a little bit. It's important, right, that we don't backtrack, and so we should treat these systems as the same way we would treat junior engineers, right? Be very, very specific about exactly what we want them to do, how we want them to do it. Not get too far away from things like version control. There's this big meme on Twitter or whatever where someone someone basically says, well, what I'm going to do is create a vibe code up an app, and then I'm not going to use version control. And then it's like, oh, everything is broken. What do I do? How do I go back?
Oh my God.
It's like we've solved this problem. We solved this problem a long time ago. Yeah. And this is the big idea here is that we want to apply the same patterns to AI assisted tools as we did for every other number of tools that we've used throughout our long storied history as developers.
So it might even be worthwhile to learn to code now before the tools get even better. So you can kind of root yourself a little bit in the storied history of all the hard fought lessons learned from software engineers along the way, right?
Like senior engineers know these patterns extraordinarily well, and then they can leverage junior engineers to do them good. To just be kind of like,
what a classic.
A little bit improper English or whatever, but that's the idea.
Yeah, right.
And so the more you understand these flows, the better you can force these agents to do the thing you want, as opposed to being terrible at doing the thing you want,
Yeah. Like, are you going to give a junior person in your org complete agency over reading and writing to every file in your system? It's like, whether you're coding or not, the answer is I hope not, right? Unless, you don't have a system yet, or they've really proved themselves already. And so, again, the patterns of the way we interact with people correspond directly to the patterns of the way we want to interact with the code and the coding agents. Okay, cool. So one last thing that we'll kind of go through before we get to the demo today is this idea of coding agent versus code agent. And, and Wiz, this is a disambiguation of language problem that this particularly is annoying to me as we're trying to teach these things often, where it's not clear that these are different until it's clear that these are different. And then you wonder, why would people name them like this? And the naming always follows much, much later. So I'm going to walk everybody through this, and then we'll have a quick discussion before we get into the demo. So this idea of a code agent, guys, This is basically, we want to give the AI a problem, we want to give it the tools, and we just say go. And it's important to sort of look at this meme here, because what it's going to do is it's going to figure out which tools it needs to call, and then it's going to put them all into like a little program and call them all at once. So this is kind of an alternative to function calling. Whereas like a function call is going to call each tool, call it, get a response, call it, get a response, call it, and do a reasoning loop with each of those. So what happens is the code agent is kind of thinking in code, and it's laying out a small program rather than a bunch of function calls in sequence. So this is the sort of canonical example from the paper called Executable Code Actions Elicit Better LLM Agents. And the instruction here is to determine the most cost-effective country to purchase the smartphone model. The countries to consider are USA, Japan, Germany, and India. And so what happens is the thinking piece here is I should calculate the phone price in USD for each country. And so we take the action, we get an answer, we take another action, we get another answer, we take another action, we get another answer. And then we can kind of assess all of these and say the most cost-effective country to purchase the smartphone model in is Japan, with a price of $904 in USD. Now, this is in contrast to a code agent. We're going to get the sort of kind of same outcome here, but what happens if we're doing it this way is we have to actually do each of these calls, and we have to do each of these calls one by one. So what happens instead is if we actually use kind of a code agent that thinks in code, what we want to do is we want to kind of put all of this together. And this whole idea of this work is to kind of create executable Python code from scratch. And then we want to kind of put all of this into a single action step. We want kind of all of this to be able to kind of think through the action in code directly. And so what the single action step looks like is it looks something like this directly from the paper here. Is we've got instead of kind of this with each function call, we can kind of just give it the instruction, and what the code agent will do is it will go through and it will write the Python code into a single step. That single step is going to look something like this, and it'll take one action. Now, you could imagine this kind of working out within a coding agent CLI context, where you give it an instruction and you allow it to sort of figure out how to write some code to figure out how to get the problem done. And so these are sort of closely related ideas, but they're quite different. We have the same tools. We have many fewer action steps. This could potentially save us cost. It could save us time. At scale, it could save us a lot. Wiz, I just want to hear a couple of any comments you have on this. Is like, are coding CLI tools going to leverage code agents? Should we expect them to? Are these to be used in tandem? Are these totally different? How should we think about parsing these two terms moving forward?
Yeah. So like coding. Okay. So
we got to speak particularly.
Code agents, as in the Huggy Face small agent implementation of code agents, right? It is a way that agents can leverage tools. So coding agents will be able to use code agents in order to get functionality. There you go.
Okay. So our coding agents might use code agents
to
help us with coding some code.
Yes.
Okay, easy. All right. Let's go ahead and see how we can use coding agents now. That was just one little caveat we wanted to include with you guys, because you might hear it and it makes it kind of hard to Google, makes it kind of hard to learn about these things if you're not very, very explicit about the language. It's almost certain to trick up something like ChatGPT. We hope it doesn't trick you guys up. Okay, we're going to get into the demo now. And Wiz, you can just stay up here because we're going to quickly get into looking at Codex, looking at this coding agent. Remember, guys, the idea is if we want to leverage the command line, the power of all of these models from the command line, we can get ChatGPT level reasoning. We can do chat-driven development. We can do a lot, and we can also, kind of see one for one everything that you might be familiar with doing Cursor already. But again, from the command line. So Wiz will show us how to get our environment kind of quickly set up a little bit, kind of look at some GitHub things, and build an app whole cloth from scratch. We'll see what we can do. Coding agent, Codex CLI, demo time. Wiz, over to you.
Yes. Okay. So here we go. We've got a famous terminal only demo for you today. So I'll just go ahead and put that onto the stage. Whoop, there we go. Perfect. Okay. And this is what we're doing. So I'll try to zoom in a little bit more so you guys can see it hopefully a little bit better. But this is the idea. We'll just shrink it down. Whoop, and then I'll hit clear so you don't have to look at whatever happened there. Okay, so this is the idea. This is what we're doing. First of all, the way that we're going to use Codex is through the CLI. So we can do things like Codex, etc. Now, what I'm going to show you is how we would get there. First of all, you are going to need to ensure that you're on 22, so node 22 or later. Once you do that, it's as simple as a sudo npm install -g OpenAI Codex. You don't have to use a sudo here. I'm in WSL2, and so I'm using sudo. There you go. Basically, you run this command. You give your password, and you input your password correctly. Famously, a requirement. And then you see it'll just load. It'll just do the thing. Okay, very cool. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use Codex. So I'm just going to go here and just type Codex. And whoa, it can be dangerous to run a coding agent outside of a Git repo in case there are changes that you want to revert, right? So first of all, it's going to encourage you to not screw this up and, in fact, to run this in a repo. Okay, fine. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's get into the Codex repo here, and we'll see we're in a GitHub repo now. You can see with the little GitHub cat there. And now, again, let's try to run Codex. So now we're running Codex, and you can see here where the working directory is. You can see what our localhost session is for this. You can see what model we're using, what provider we're using, and what approval mode we're in. So I'm going to do what they suggest and say, explain this code base, what it do. And then we can press enter, and it's just going to go ahead and think through. You'll notice it's going to execute CLI commands, right? So these are commands that it's able to execute. It's going to do some reading for these files in order to figure it out. There you go. The idea, though, is that, we are going to, we're leveraging this, right? It's not doing anything that's changing anything. And so we're not having to approve what it's doing, right? This is the beauty. So it can read in this mode fully. And then it tells us, in short, this repo contains everything you need to build and publish OpenAI Codex CLI, the TypeScript React Inc. front end, the agent sandbox logic, CI, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's cool. Let's go. It's cool. Now, that's kind of boring because we could just read the README for that, right? Now, if we had a more complex code base, it might be a little bit more interesting. But the idea is, let's do the thing that it's, I believe best at. Now, where we are here is in the Codex demo. Now, you'll notice that in this demo, we have this codex.md, right? And what this codex.md is it's actually instructions. Now, these instructions are specific to this project. What this means is that this project is in this directory. So when we run Codex from this directory, right, from the root of our Git repo, it's going to understand the instructions here, right? You use Pygame when creating games. You like ensuring games are fully featured. You ensure games have a menu, game over, and high score feature, et cetera, et cetera. These are, samples of instructions, but this is the idea. But beyond that, we have the ability to add even more information. So what we can actually do is go to our home directory.codex and then add instructions to our instructions.md. Now, these instructions are kind of, global Codex instructions. So whenever we use Codex, right, in different projects, it's going to understand these things as our preferences, right? And again, we're using like very simplified instructions just to show off the kinds of things that you can put in, right? I'm Canadian, so if it types color, I want to see that extra U, right? I don't want to bother with the incorrect spelling of things. I prefer branch development, so I told it to prefer branch development. I prefer UV, so I told it to prefer UV. These kinds of things, right? And in the chat, Live AI Lab has been talking about like setting up PRDs, setting up, really detailed documents. And this is where we would put these things. This is how we would inject that context to our coding agent. Okay, there you go. The idea is we can give these meta instructions so that when we say things like, when we use Codex, we can have it at least some assurance it's going to do things the way we want. Okay, so if we look at our Codex now, we can fire it off. Now we can set the model, right? So we can choose what model to use, like if we want to use 4.1. And we can also use the full auto. Okay, full auto is a suggestion or approval mode, right? You can see here we have full auto. We have a number of different approval modes we could use between full auto, suggest, and auto edit. Full auto is basically the agent's going to take the wheel. Suggest is it's going to ask me to do a change before it does a change. And then auto edit's going to be a balance between the two. So let's just have it in suggest, and let's ask it to, change the color of the bird, in our Flappy Bird game, to be green. Okay, we can fire this off. We see what it's doing. It's just thinking. It's going to read some files to try to understand some things. There you go. It's going to get into our Python code. It's going to probably try to make some changes, and then it's going to ask, right, if we want to execute those changes. This is the idea of suggest. Now, if we wanted to go a little bit more off the rails, right, we can just instead use full auto, right? So right now, this is what it's showing us the diff, right? Everything is beautifully done in patches here so we can read things very clearly, but it's showing us the diff, right? We can ask it to explain what it's doing. We can edit the thing it's doing or give feedback on it, or we can switch approval mode. So I'm going to switch approval mode and go to full auto, and then I'm going to commit this or ask it to do this. And then we're going to see it's just going to start doing stuff, right? Now, this is a very important, process, because what it's going to do here is it's going to actually look at all that I have set up, all my GitHub, remotes, and it's going to interact in the way that I told it to in my meta instructions, right? So all of this, you'll see here, it's creating a new branch called feature green bird, right? Is this necessary? 100% no. Is it doing it because I asked it to? Also 100% yes, right? And this is the idea of these kinds of tools. You'll see now that it's committing this with a message, and you'll see now that it's pushing this to that origin, right? And now I can go to GitHub and I can make a PR, right? And I can get it approved or whatever I have to do. But the big idea is that all of this is done in a single CLI. We can add those instructions and best practices. We can design the flow that we most desire, and we can do it all to the CLI. This is what we're doing, right? And so I want to be very clear that this is like the best kind of way to use these tools is to treat it like a junior dev, be extraordinarily hands-on, super prescriptive. I personally don't love full auto mode, right? I like seeing what it's going to do and then potentially providing feedback. But you do what's in your heart of hearts. But that's the idea. That's it. Codex. It does cool stuff. It makes Flappy Bird game. Very quickly, let's see how it did, right? So it made this Flappy Bird game. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use, UV run main.py. We can see it's running. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen on Flappy Bird, and we can see if it did a good job. The bird should be green. Oh, look at that. We see the bird is green. We're hopping through pipes. Again, I didn't write any of these lines of code. It's just making this through Codex. And now we can flap to our heart's content. Look at that. We got a new high score. Go team. There you go. I'll send you guys back to Greg after we saw that Codex, demonstration. Please don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell notification. We're live every Wednesday at this time. We love doing these events. And so we'll see you in the next one. Back to Greg.
All right. High score, straight up vibes. Let's go. We've got time to wrap up. We got some questions from you guys in the Slido. We put together this idea of coding agency of various levels today. This is something that we, if you have feedback on, we're more than open to it. And this is something we'll continue to work on and think about. And this idea of like the level 4, 5s, and 6s, this is where we are today. We were kind of memeing yesterday, like kind of this one is the coding agent. This one's like coding agent. And then, we kind of have like the for real Devin Manis kind of real coding agent. Let's go. And the question is like, how do you prefer to code? And pick up a tool that works for your workflows today. Pick up a tool that allows you to treat it like a junior dev. Pick up a tool that aligns with where you are. If you're a little bit more advanced, maybe you want to sit in the IDE or the CLI. If you're a little bit less advanced, maybe you want to pick up Devin or Manis off the shelf. There's no problem either way. But beware, the vibes can get you into trouble. Best practices are really best practices in coding in general. And so, you shouldn't be surprised to really see any of them. I'm not sure headless mode is particularly a very good best practice unless you have really good instructions, unless you have really, really specific things you're trying to get out of it. But it is a lot of fun to play around with, and we hope you guys have fun playing with this tool as much as we did. So let's get into some questions. Thanks, everybody, for jumping in the chat today. We've got some questions in the Slido that I'm going to go ahead and get to here. Cam asks, what use case would Codex be better than something like Cursor Pro? Is Codex better for any given use case than a Cursor?
Better is such a,
more better. Okay.
I know.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Black Current prefers level 10. Let's go. We've got Anonymous asking, can you briefly highlight additional features available today in Claude Code compared to Codex CLI? Yes, we can. You think of any off the top of your head, Wiz? I'm going to pull up a couple here.
MCP is the big one. It's kind of a, if you go to their GitHub, there's an issue about it. It's got like almost 100, upvotes or whatever.
Everybody wants MCP.
Everybody wants MCP. I want MCP. I don't understand why it didn't ship with MCP.
Crazy.
Other than that's Claude's thing or Anthropic's thing, maybe OpenAI.
But they just adopted it. Like, what the heck? Yeah.
Listen,
I know.
MCP is the big one. There's actually a bunch of others though. Like Claude Code is quite fully featured at this point. And I think that's where we should expect Codex to get to, though not yet.
Yeah. So like you can basically set up your allowed tools from the get-go as you're setting up your dev environment. You can like basically like it's got a lot of kind of connections out of the box that aren't necessarily totally ready to roll in something like Codex. This idea of especially when you get into into the multi-agent stuff and the specific headless mode for Claude. Again, read the Claude Code Best Practices guide for more of specific insights into those features. But effectively, if you're not really into using the CLI-based tools, I would just wait until you run into a problem that requires one of the additional features. It seems like they're kind of more power user-y features than anything else that are missing. Codex is more of a bare bones thing, probably easier to get started with. Why is OpenAI promoting Codex? When are they dropping $3 billion for Windsurf? Is Cursor cursed? LOL. That's a hilarious one. Yeah, I don't know. Just TechCrunch be talking about $3 billion. It's just that's the rumor mill, guys. That was a week ago, so
yeah, I mean,
it's not clear.
They're different tools, right? And they're for different audiences, and they're meant to be used in different ways. There you go. Right. Yeah. That's why.
Here's a little linkerino to that article if you want to read it.
It's like why does GitHub Desktop exist when the CLI tool for Git exists, and it's clearly better in all cases, right? It's because some people prefer the experience of GitHub Desktop. It's worth supporting. It's worth making features for. It doesn't take away from any of the people who are going to use the Git CLI tool, right? It just adds people that would never use Git clone, right? Like it's the same thing for Codex and Windsurf, right? Yeah. There are a number of people who just would never use Codex, and Windsurf is the tool for them.
Yeah. Okay. This was from our should discussion, but how do you measure good? How do you trust a fully autonomous coding machine? How can we trust these junior coding agent devs, bro? Keep them on Rails. I mean, it's the only thing, right?
How do we trust junior devs to do anything, right? Because they're like truly, they have way more autonomy than agents, and sometimes they're worse. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like raw programming ability, right? And the answer is we don't. We really don't. We make them do PRs. We review their PRs. We don't give them full access. We don't allow them into the unguardrailed sandbox, right? And that's just the reality. We let them just be exactly where they're supposed to be, do exactly what they're supposed to do, and never step outside those bounds.
That's right. Stay in the sandbox. Stay in your lane. Stay in the box. We'll all soon be junior devs. Live AI Lab reminds us. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap there, Wiz. And guys, pick the coding agent that speaks to you. Windsurf is an underdog today, so maybe you like them, but maybe tomorrow they'll be the big dog in town. They'll be a lot less likable as a result. You'll be rooting for Claude Code again. So we'll see. The edge and what's happening out here is definitely going to continue to stay interesting. Coding agents, Codex. That's a wrap. Thanks, Wiz. It's time to wrap the sesh. And I want to tell you guys a little bit about our courses and community before we head out today. If you're not in our Discord, we'd love to have you, especially folks like Live AI Lab crushing the chat. I'd love to see you in the Discord if you're not already. Join the AIM community today. Start building, shipping, and sharing with us this week. Also, we're launching Cohort 7 of the AI Engineering Bootcamp. I've been working quite hard to update the curriculum recently, and we're excited that this is going to be our first cohort that actually has 2 sections. One is going to be an international section, perfectly suited for folks in the European time zone, Central European time, in the evenings. And so we're going to have international instructors leading that one, as the Wiz and I lead our flagship course that's in the nighttime Eastern. And so we'll have 2 sections. It's going to be really, really cool. It's the biggest cohort yet, and we're really excited about it. I've also got a lot of curriculum updates that I'm excited about as well. Classic LangChain RAG chains are out. Fine tuning is out. This is now table stakes. If you don't know how to do it, it's prerequisite material to be an AI engineer. And you might not need to do very much of it. If you do, you can probably do it pretty easily. Chainlet for front ends is out. Hugging Face Spaces is out. We're going to pick up Vercel to be able to do deployments instead of Hugging Face spaces. We're going to focus on vibe-coded custom front ends. We're going to leverage a couple new agent frameworks, including the OpenAI Agents SDK. We're going to also talk about how to build code agents with Hugging Face's small agents framework. And we'll talk, of course, about CLI coding agents and computer use agents as well. Get a little bit into multimodality, although we're not going whole cloth into multimodality quite yet because we don't think it's ready out here on the edge. So if you're ready to accelerate, definitely check out that cohort that's coming up. And we've also got our team available if you'd like to talk to them at all about your particular journey or the journey that your team is on, how AI Makerspace might be able to help. You can book with them directly. We'll throw the link into the chat today. If you're looking for any additional learning materials, you can find everything you need on our awesome AIM index on GitHub or through our open source courses page on our website. We try to make it easy for you guys to build, ship, and share, and we hope to see you do just that. Until next time, guys, keep building, shipping, and sharing, and we will most certainly do the same. We hope to see you back next week as we talk about what is an agent. There's been a lot of hullabaloo between LangGraph and OpenAI. People are throwing down on X. We're going to get into it. We have lots of thoughts. What really is an agent? We're going to do some pattern matching. It's going to be a discussion-heavy one, and we're going to get to the bottom of what we know in 2025. Join us. Should be a banger next week. See you next time, guys, and have a great rest of your week. See you soon.